Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Agile and Business Analysts. Is there a place for us? My name is Trevor, and I'll be helping out with today's session. So today we are joined by Michelina De Nuno, who is a seasoned management professional with extensive experience building high-performing teams, leading organizational change initiatives, and championing the business analysis profession. She has led large-scale projects in various capacities, including project sponsor, program manager, Proxy product owner, development manager, and Agile consultant. Thanks for being here with us, Michelina.
Hi, Trevor. Thanks a lot for your kind words. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to be here and talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Some of you who know me, I'm on a bit of a mission to help organizations really recognize the value that business analysts bring to the table, especially when it comes to succeeding with Agile initiatives. My first experience with Agile happened about 15 years ago, and to date, it's one of the best experiences I've ever had. And looking back, one of the main reasons it was such a great experience, aside from working with such a wonderful team, is the fact that at the time I didn't have a clue that I was working in an Agile way, and neither did the rest of the team. And this ignorance actually ensured that I never really questioned whether or not I had a place on that team, and neither did anyone else. We were launching a new product. It was a new product for the organization, something that we had never done before. We had pulled together a core team whose skills we needed in order to successfully launch this new product. We had to build new internal capabilities. We were working with external third parties to get us up and running on a completely new technology that we had no experience with. And so as a team, we had decided, you know what, we don't want to wait till the end of the 5 months. We basically had 5 months to, from scratch, get a new product off the ground, build internal capabilities around ordering, provisioning, fulfillment, call center management applications, technical support, all of that, and then integrating with third parties. And because we had such a short time period, we had decided we don't want to wait for at the end of the 5 months to find out that what we did was right or what we did was wrong, and whether or not we even got the right features or capabilities built to get customers onto this purchasing this particular product. And in all of that work, none of us really questioned whether or not we needed someone, a business analyst. In my case, that was me, because that's the title that I held at that particular organization. Whether or not we even needed anyone to focus on requirements or participate in this particular project. Because we had decided we didn't want to wait the 5 months to find out if things were working or not. We had decided as a team, no one told us we needed to, but as a team we decided, let's just do iterative development instead. So a lot of the work we were doing was building software. So we decided, we're going to meet every day at the beginning of every single week. We were going to plan out what was going to be happening. At the end of that week, we were going to ensure that what was built was tested. We would demo it to whoever needed to have a look at confirming whether or not we built the right thing. And then that would inform and validate and, would start all over the following week. And it wasn't until I actually left that organization, went to a new company where we had decided we wanted to pilot Scrum for this new product, or a new project that I was assigned to, that I realized that we had been already working in an iterative way, or in an Agile space. We just didn't really use the terminology, and therefore, as a result, never really questioned who needed to be on the team and who didn't. We really just looked at what skills did we need to be successful. Unfortunately, what's happened over the last few years is, I would say in about the last 5 years, as I've become more and more entrenched in the Agile space, is that there have been a lot of myths, or what I like to call fallacies, directed towards the business analysis profession, and just even business analysis and requirements in general, in terms of them not having a place in the Agile world. And on the screen, what you will notice is a set of 5 common myths. There are many, many more Agile myths out there, but these are the ones that I seem to hear over and over again, and that colleagues hear over and over again, when it comes to BAs, requirements, and business analysis in general. So in order to provide me with a little bit of context, I'd like to get a sense of whether or not you've heard of any of these myths. Trevor is going to put up a poll, so if you can check off whatever applies to you. So I'll just hand it over to you, Trevor.
All right, guys. Yeah. So as Michelina said, we just want to gauge where what everyone has heard before. Again, all five of these options are not true. They're all myths about Agile, but we'd like to get a sense of where everyone's at. So which of these Agile myths are you familiar with? The first one being there is no place for BA in Agile, or maybe you've heard you don't need requirements in Agile. Agile is just an IT thing only. There's no documentation or planning in Agile, or you never know when scope will be delivered. So yeah, you can select as many as you think apply that you've heard of, and I just want to take a moment to make sure everyone has a chance to vote. While we're waiting here, I want to remind everyone that the webinar is being recorded today. I know some of you have just joined us, so just so you know, there will be a link provided at the end of the session. Okay, I think what's key is participation here. So as many people who can vote, the better. So I see that we haven't quite got as many people as we'd like. So if you guys want to pitch in, it'd be great. Okay, just going to give you a few more seconds and we're going to close the poll. All right, and thanks everyone. Let's take a look at the results here. So it looks pretty even across the board, the highest percentage being 50% and 53% for options B and C. What do you, or B and D there? What do you think of that, Ms. Shalina?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Actually, I'm so definitely the B and C are pretty common. So one of the things that I found going hand in hand is this: we don't need requirements and there's no documentation, because often you know, we think of requirements as just endless documentation. So that looks about right. It's actually pretty good that it's only 32% for there's no place for being a business analyst in Agile. So that's fantastic, because at least we've made a little bit of progress over the last 5 years in terms of maybe dispelling part of that myth. I'm hoping that eventually we'll get to 0% under there's no BA, or there's no place for a business analyst in Agile. Hopefully with some of the things we're going to talk about in this webinar, we can completely scratch that one off the list. All right, so let's continue. So we're going to cover a number of different topics in today's session, and I've listed them up here. We're going to spend a little more time, a little bit less time, depending on where we feel there's more of an interest. I am going to get Trevor to help me get a sense of who's on the call. He's going to ask you to fill out 2 more polls. So thank you for participating. I'd like to understand the current role, and then we're going to follow that up by a second poll around your Agile experience. And this just helps me get some context, so I have an idea of where we should spend more time or less time during the webinar. Over to you, Trevor.
Thanks, Ms. Shalina. And again, we just want to encourage everyone to take a minute to vote. It really helps us personalize the webinar so that you guys can get the most out of it. So it's really in your best interest to take a moment to pick one of these answers. So the question is, again, what is your current role in your organization, so we can tailor this Agile webinar to best suit you. So the first answer would be if you're a business analyst or a business system analyst, product owner or proxy product owner, process analyst or data analyst, project manager or team manager, and of course everyone doesn't fit into just those 4 categories, so other is of course an option too. All right, we're seeing a lot more participation this time. I really appreciate that, you guys. I'm going to close this poll, just give everyone a few more seconds here. And okay, close, and let's take a look at the results. Okay, so majority are business analysts. I mean, this is a business analyst webinar, so not too surprising, but
very good.
I'm going to close that for you there.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. And the next one is, the next poll we're going to open is, what is your current Agile experience? And
this one, yeah, this poll question, I guess, is just to gauge how much time people have spent actually working in Agile before.
Yeah.
So yes, so the question is, what is your Agile experience? So either you're currently transitioning into Agile, working on your first Agile, Agile, I guess in this case.
The go-to webinar truncates a little bit.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Actively working on Agile team for 1 to 3 years, so maybe you have a little bit of experience. If you're enthusiastic about Agile and you've got lots of experience, 4 to 7 years. Devoted to Agile for more than 7 years. You're an expert in that case, I'd say. Or perhaps you have no Agile experience, and this is just a learning, building blocks for your learning today. Okay, looks good. We're at a good percentage of votes. I'm going to close the poll here in just a few seconds, and we are closed. Let's take another look at the results here. So for this one, Micheline, it looks like we're seeing a lot of these are a lot of first-timers.
Okay,
for
great.
The most part.
That's excellent. Good. So we'll kind of focus our attention more on, when you're getting started, or if you're early on in your journey, what does it mean for you, and how can you make that transition as smooth as possible? Excellent. So in the context of this webinar, there are 2 definitions that I like to ensure that we can use so we can level set a little bit. What I have found is different organizations, different teams, they have different interpretations of what we mean by business analysis and requirement. So in the context of this webinar, these are the 2 definitions we're going to be using. And I want you to pay particular attention to the definition of business analysis, and I want you to, pull out some of the key words. So business analysis is about enabling change, defining needs, recommending solutions that deliver value. So ultimately, if you really look at this definition, it is all about figuring out what our customers want. Once we know what they want, figuring out what we need to do in order to deliver that value to them. So it is all about change and enabling it. You'll notice it doesn't say producing a 100-page document filled with requirements or endless modeling techniques or use case descriptions that go on and on and on and nobody wants to sign off on. Okay? It is really about change, enabling change, delivering value. And the other definition around requirement, pretty short and succinct, a usable representation of a need. So a requirement is a need. It doesn't say it's written the format that requirement is written in. It doesn't say it should be written as the system shall. It doesn't say you need to use a user story format. All it really says is it's a need. So we need to figure out what that need is from the perspective of our stakeholders or ultimately our customers. In today's session, when I use words like value and customer, so when you think of value, think of the benefits that you're providing. So you might be public sector versus private sector. So the value is from a completely different perspective, and what we consider to be a value in one may not be a value in another. So you put in what your definition is of value or benefits. And then when I talk about a customer, you can replace that word with whatever your definition of the customer is. So is it a customer? Is it a stakeholder? Is it an end user? Person who uses your solutions? Is it, if you're in the public sector, is it a patient? Is it a doctor that might use a system that you build for them to use in the hospital? Is it an actual client, like a third party? So if you're a consulting firm that provides services to a partner or a client, or you work with suppliers. So anytime I say value to customers, replace those 2 terms with what they mean for you. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Agile Lifecycle. And the visual that we have up on the screen here, this is a generic view of the lifecycle. So it doesn't really presuppose any particular Agile framework like Scrum or SAFe or XP. It really is just a generic lifecycle that I'm going to walk you through at a high level from the perspective of where can we be involved as a business analyst. The one thing I want to mention, so for those of you who maybe are starting out, you are going to hear words like iteration, you're going to hear words like sprint. An iteration and a sprint, they're basically the same thing. So the Scrum framework, which is an Agile approach, they have come up with their own terminology, which actually relates back to other generic terms that a lot of the other frameworks use. So when you hear me say iteration, it's the same thing as sprint, except that sprint is the word that you use if you're doing Scrum, okay, or implementing Scrum. Okay? And if there's any terms like that, I'm going to point them out as we go. So some of the terms on the slide don't seem familiar, not because you're using Scrum, don't worry, or you've heard about Scrum. I will kind of layer in different terms as we go. So let's start off with the beginning stage. I've titled it Inception or Initiation. So this is really the stage where a bunch of work happens in order for us to be ready, so that come Monday morning, when the team gets together and they start building or they start figuring out what they need to work on, we're ready to go. Okay. We select as part of the work that we do ahead of time. By the way, in the industry, this might be known, or you might hear the term iteration zero or sprint zero. There's lots of debate right now on whether it should be called an iteration or a sprint, whether it shouldn't, because it could be a completely different time box. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same time box as your iterations moving forward. Some other organizations, as a result of that debate, call it the pre-planning stage. It doesn't really matter what it's called. Here is what it is. There's a bunch of work that needs to happen ahead of time, so that when we actually start working, the development team, the testers, etc., we actually know what we're working on, and we're not wasting time trying to figure out what requirements are important. So at this inception stage or planning stage or iteration zero stage, whatever you want to call it, there's a bunch of work that needs to happen. At a minimum, there needs to be a vision for whatever it is that we're trying to do, whether that's a vision for the product or the service that's being sold, or if your organization is implementing Agile based at the project level, then a vision for the project that hopefully ties back to the overall vision for the product and service that the project actually supports. From that vision, we need to actually come up with some sort of roadmap. And again, high level, like what are the key capabilities? What are the key functions? What are the core processes? What are the core things that we need in order to make the vision come to fruition? Based on that, we'll come up with some sort of release plan, because we have to have an idea of how we're going to, in what order some of these items from the roadmap should actually be built and delivered to our customers. And then, of course, we have a high-level list of our initial requirements. That in Agile, that's called the product backlog. And you'll notice I'm saying high level. So you don't need all the minutiae of details. And it's not going to be a stable list. It's going to change as you go through and get more and more feedback throughout your different sprints or iterations. Okay, so it's not static and it's not necessarily detailed. However...
All right, sorry, I'm going to interrupt here. We're having an issue with the connection or possibly sound. Can everyone hear me? I just want to gauge if you can take a moment to type into the chat that you can confirm that you can hear me speaking. Yes. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Okay, that's great. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Sorry, Michelina, for the interruption there. It sounds like everything's fine.
Should we just double test? Is it maybe me? Am I maybe too far away, or?
No.
I'm still okay?
Everyone says it's very clear. I think maybe it's just a few people are having connection issues.
Okay. All right. So let me keep going. So by the end of this pre-planning stage, you should at least, once you have your high-level list of requirements, you will need to know, at a minimum, at the top of this requirements list, what are the first things we need the team to work on come Monday morning when we actually start our iterations, when we start working. Because for example, for these slides, I'm going to take the example of 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, the team is going to work on something. At the end of the 2 weeks, they're going to have built and tested something and potentially can be shippable or released into production for our customers or end users to use. So come Monday morning, we shouldn't be scrambling to figure out, well, what should we actually be working on? So there needs to at least to be some requirements at the top of that product backlog list, or the top of our requirements list, that are of higher priority, that are ready to go. And by ready, I mean we can actually start working on them come Monday morning. So in this case here, so I want you to think about a lot of the work that business analysts do. Now, in Agile, the person ultimately responsible for developing the vision and the roadmap is typically the product owner or the business lead, in conjunction with maybe some key stakeholders that need to come up with, the strategy and, a high-level view of, what the vision is for the product. And then you can engage the team, the Agile team, and whoever else you need to really sort of flesh out to some degree, come up with a skeleton release plan so we know when things need to, at a high level, maybe go to production. So a lot of the work that happens here from a business analysis perspective, I want you to think about the knowledge area around like strategy analysis, needs assessment, enterprise analysis. So the more senior or the more seasoned work that we would do traditionally today, where we might help a project sponsor or a business lead come up with a business case, figure out what their features or capabilities should be on the roadmap. So it's a lot of the senior level work that happens before maybe even a project in the traditional world gets approved. So think vision and scope document, those types of things in the old world. In the new world, we have different terms for them. But that work that you would have been doing when you take an idea and try to help the project sponsor sell it so that they can get the funding that eventually makes it a project, all that pre-work, that's really what we're doing here. Okay? Again, but not necessarily to the same level of detail that we would in the traditional space. So once we've got that, we've helped the project sponsor, the product owner, the key stakeholders identify what we're going to be working on. Monday morning rolls around, we're going to start our first iteration, and we're going to start working on the top set of requirements. So here, so come Monday morning, we have a meeting. That meeting is called planning meeting. In Scrum, it's called sprint planning. And here we have it listed as the plan the iteration. And fundamentally what happens there is, as a team, we decide, okay, here are the top requirements, the requirements at the top of our product backlog. Do we have sufficient detail? Do they make sense? Does the criteria, acceptance criteria, do we have enough details to move forward? We also identify as a team the tasks that need to be done in order to ensure that the right requirements get built at the end of the 2 weeks. And we identify any additional information that we might need or any questions we need answered. Do we need a mock-up? There's some additional legwork that needs to happen, maybe some sort of story map that the development team might need, etc. But this is the place where we plan and commit to what we're going to be working on for the rest of the 2 weeks. And you can see where we would play a key role here as business analysts, because I want you to think of it where we take a high-level requirement, we layer in the details, we confirm that they're in a good space, we get the sign-off from the product owner to move forward. Like we do these in the traditional space, it just takes us longer to get to it. Here, we do it in a meeting where we've pretty much got the details that we need, and then we get comfortable and commit and sign off. Okay. And when I say sign off, I mean in terms of signing off or getting agreement to what the team is going to work on within the next 2 weeks. So as the 2 weeks move along, there's many things that are happening. And what's in essence at the core, we're developing the product increment. So a lot of the terminology I'm going to be using today are really around software development. However, you can actually use an agile approach or this agile life cycle for process re-engineering, any types of other changes you want to make that maybe aren't related to software, so other types of projects. But for consistency's sake, I'm going to use the software perspective. So the development team, the developers, the testers, they're going to build and test out the capabilities that we agreed as a team to build over the next 2 weeks. We're going to have a meeting every single day that's called a stand-up. In Scrum, it's called your daily Scrum, where we measure or gauge is the better word, how much progress the team is making. So, how are we doing? Does anybody need any help? Are there any stumbling blocks? Are there any obstacles, etc.? And then there's a bunch of other work that's going to be happening because during this 2 weeks, we need to ensure that for the next iteration, we have the requirements identified or user stories. So work around refining the backlog. So the term where you're working on the next set of requirements is called backlog refinement. This is a great place where business analysts can help get those requirements ready, whether they're user stories or whatever format that you use, working with the product owner or the business lead to get those stories or requirements ready for the next iteration. That's another thing that we can do here throughout the 2 weeks, as well as testing. So you may find, if you haven't yet, once you start your Agile journey, if you're not lucky enough to get a tester assigned to your team or as part of the team, you may be asked as the business analyst to do a lot of the testing work initially. Okay. And then we're getting in the home stretch here. So near the end of the 2 weeks, there are a number of things that are going to happen. once the team has finished building and testing what was committed to, they're going to review what was built with the business lead or product owner and critical stakeholders. Sometimes it's called doing a demo. So basically you're demonstrating what was built so that you can get sign-off or confirmation that what was built was correct. We can accept it and move on. Or if something wasn't quite right, maybe the team has to fix it if there's a defect, for example. Or maybe we built the right thing. However, by actually seeing what was built, we realize, hey, we missed a bunch of requirements. And that could be the product owner or other stakeholders. So at this point, we might even find additional requirements that we need to add to our product backlog. And you can see why business analysts would be involved there. In my experience, I have found in one particular organization, I actually was the one that was doing the demo. So I was presenting what was built to the stakeholders for a particular project because there were many stakeholders and one sort of business lead. For whatever reason, I got nominated to do the demos rather than a developer presenting what got built. Once that's done, we decide as a team, or if your organization is set up to do so, you might actually deliver or deploy what was built into production so your stakeholders or your end users can start using the capabilities right away. And then the very end, we want to make sure that we reflect back on the work that we did to identify any opportunities for improvement so we can get better and better as a team. So as a business analyst, you can kind of start inferring where we could be involved. One, of course, we could do the demo. Two, we can actually facilitate the retrospective if we're really strong facilitators, or if the Scrum Master or someone else isn't available to do it. And more importantly, we can identify opportunities for improve our user stories or our requirements in ensuring we can increase the likelihood that every demo moving forward, the team builds the right things. In some organizations, so often the larger organizations, before you can actually deploy something, what you've built into production, there's sort of this organizational readiness work that needs to happen. So in some instances, as in this case, my business systems analyst role, I was actually required to really look at the organizational readiness checklist, or in Agile, we call it definition of done, and make sure that we're compliant with whatever the exit and entry criteria are into production. So that might also be a place where you might focus some of your efforts as a BA. And this, again, think of this as more the implementation space near the end if you're trying to make the link between Agile versus the traditional space. Okay. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment. I know that might have been a lot to digest. Am I okay to keep going, Trevor? Or
yes? Everything's all the sound issues are taken care of, I think. I think some people were having issues with connectivity, but it seems to be taken care of now.
Okay, perfect. So let's keep going. So the next thing I want to talk about, so I've given you a little bit of a flavor of where we could fit throughout the Agile lifecycle. So many things depending on, where your interests lie or your skill set, or what you would find a little bit more interesting versus less interesting. The other thing I want to talk about are the different roles that we could potentially move into or out of in terms of being a business analyst. So the roles that I have identified here are the roles that align to Scrum. Depending on the framework that your organization uses, there are other roles or titles that vary from framework to framework. So for example, the roles in XP are going to be different than the ones from the Scaled Agile framework, which will be different from Kanban. The more important piece is, what are the actual responsibilities and do they make sense in the context of your skill set and what's transferable? The reason I selected Scrum is this seems to be more popular or more common right now, and these roles are the ones that keep coming up over and over again, so I figured this would be a good starting place. So first off, let's talk about the product owner. So as a business analyst, you actually have the skills to move into a product owner role should you choose to. Now, a little bit about what a product owner is. So product owners, as with the other roles in Agile, have lots and lots of work to do. But at the core, the product owner serves as the visionary for the product or the service or the project, depending on how your organization is implementing Agile. And fundamentally, that means they're responsible for not only coming up with the vision, but also deciding what's most important in order to fulfill that vision. So they absolutely are a decision maker, and they have to be empowered in order to make whatever decisions they need that are in the best interest of moving that vision and that product forward. And ultimately, that product owner, they own, or they're accountable for that product backlog, for the requirements list. And when I say they own it, basically, ultimately, they're accountable in the end for ensuring the right things are at the top of the list, and the things that are not of priority are lower on the list, or maybe don't even get to be on the list. Okay? So they're definitely the visionary for the product. Now, when you think about the product owner in that particular context, there's probably some business analysis skills that come to mind. I've listed a few of them up on the screen here. We won't go through them one by one, but by nature, you should probably have already figured out if you're going to move into a product owner role, I mean, there needs to be, you need to acquire or feel comfortable serving in a leadership capacity. Because in addition to coming up with that vision for your product, you also need to be able to sell it to other people within the organization, your stakeholders, because eventually you're going to have to get people aligned because everyone's going to want different things out of the product or service that you happen to be the owner of. And in a larger organization, it might be a little bit more difficult because there are a lot more stakeholders that might need to be involved. In a startup, if you're the product owner, you usually have the authority to do whatever it is that you want to do. So sometimes it's a little bit easier. Okay? But lots of leadership, prioritization skills, lots of negotiation and conflict resolution. The one thing, though, that I want to point out is if, as a business analyst, you decide that you want to move into a product owner role, you actually cease to be a business analyst and you become the product owner. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of skills that are easily transferable into the product owner role, which actually makes it a good role for us to take on if we enjoy that space. But at the same time, in parallel, we're going to have to acquire some new skills. Because the product owner really is focused on both the long-term and short-term strategy, as well as connecting with their customers, whoever their customers happen to be, they also want to maximize the return on investment. And this requires you having a good understanding not only of what happens within your organization, but where you fit within the industry, understanding the domain in the context of your competitors, reaching out to your customers, participating in market research, leading focus groups, these types of things. So these are things that often business analysts aren't exposed to unless they're working more in the enterprise analysis space. So there are some extra things that we need to acquire in terms of skills and knowledge. But more importantly, the piece I want you to take away is that when you stop being a business analyst, sometimes it's hard to want to let go of the piece where you're really trying to focus on the requirements piece without necessarily focusing on, well, which requirements are most important to maximize ROI. At a minimum, as a product owner, most strong product owners or leads will need to produce business cases. So if you've never done one before, you're going to have to learn how to, right? And at the core of being able to put that together, all this other knowledge some of which I've listed here, that you need to acquire. And absolutely doable, because once you figure out how to do this, it could be a quite passionate role for you. So the next role I want to talk about is the business analyst moving into a Scrum Master role. And at a high level, Scrum Master is really the person who is often considered the facilitator, where they help remove impediments, they protect the team, they really ensure that if we're going to follow Agile, we're being productive, making progress, moving things forward. And just based on that, some core business analysis skills should come to mind, right? We're going to be facilitating ceremonies. We need leadership to remove any impediments, whether they're within the team, whether they're outside the team. We have to be very good at getting people to be able to make decisions. But ultimately, same thing with a Scrum Master. Once you become one, you cease to be a BA. So the skills work well to transition, but for the most part, our role is to help create an environment where the team can actually self-organize and, more importantly, self-manage. So this requires really a lot of coaching skills, the ability to create an environment where you may be, as a BA, because we have a lot of problem-solving and analytical skills, you may be 3 steps ahead of the team. But as a Scrum Master, if you're 3 steps ahead, your role is to create an environment to help the team get 3 steps ahead, not to tell them that they should be at step 3 and how to get to step 3. So it really, you end up being more hands-off. And sometimes it's a little bit frustrating because you want to just give them the answer, and your role as a Scrum Master is to create an environment where they can come up with the answer for themselves. Okay. And we're quickly going to go through when you're a BA as part of the development team. Fundamentally, you end up doing a lot of what you do today. You retain your BA role. Here, though, you're probably going to be spending a lot of your time on the backlog refinement and helping the product owner, order and get the right details for the requirements. The emphasis here, though, once you're part of an Agile development team, is you're going to figure out how to maximize the work not done. So it's not taking the 100 requirements that we would normally have in a traditional environment and figuring out how to split those up. It's more about, out of the 100 requirements, what are the 20 that we actually need to move forward? And what are the highest value ones, so we work on those first. So we will have to adapt our current business analysis skills somewhat to make them a little bit more lightweight. The last but not least, I want to talk about the business analyst as a proxy product owner. Often this role is where we serve as an intermediary between the product owner and the rest of the team. Unfortunately, sometimes this can go horribly wrong, or it can be one of the best experiences you've ever had. As a proxy product owner, there's one of two things that typically happens. You either feel like a ping pong and you're running back and forth trying to meet everybody's needs between the product owner and the rest of the team, or you're actually given some sort of level of trust and credibility where you help drive and influence what's on that product roadmap, but also the requirements. So you actually could counsel or provide direction to the product owner based on your expertise as a business analyst. I can tell you firsthand, if you're in the ping pong role, it's a horrible experience. If you are empowered to make some decisions or at least recommendations where you can help influence and guide the product owner, it's a wonderful experience to be in. Okay, so this is just a summary view of all the roles we've already covered. I just want to take a moment based on, I think we're going to, why don't we skip the next poll, I think.
Okay.
Because I have a good sense of what role everyone is on the call. Let's just keep going so we don't run out of time.
Okay, that works.
So no Agile webinar would be complete without mentioning the Agile Manifesto values. What you will see up on the screen on the left-hand side are the Agile Manifesto values. On the right are what I call the Agile Business Analysis values. So this is a list of values that the IIBA, the International Institute of Business Analysis, has come up with in partnership with the Agile Alliance for helping guide business analysts in terms of what are the core values that we would need in the business analysis space to help us support and even manifest the values from the Agile Manifesto. And you will notice that they all are very supportive or support in some way, shape, or form the original Agile Manifesto values. We're not going to go through them one by one. If there's a need to do that, we can probably do that in a subsequent webinar. But the most important thing here is that there is lots and lots of work being done to reinforce that, yes, as business analysts, we have our own core values that allow us to support and, in fact, more easily roll out Agile within our organizations. The only thing I want to point out about this list is the top one, see the whole. I don't want you to confuse that with knowing everything about all your requirements up front. This is really about the ability to see the big picture and understand how to put different pieces together to, again, bring that value to our customers. Okay. This slide here really just includes a list. By now, I've probably repeated some of these again, so I'm not going to go through them one by one because I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. But at the core of what we do as BAs, first of all, it revolves around product discovery, so getting requirements, understanding the needs, etc. But we're also change agents, whether or not we're called that. Anytime we work on something, it's because there's a new need, and a new need suggests that some change needs to occur. So it lends us very, very, I guess, maybe intuitive isn't quite the right word, but it lends itself well for us to transition over because as change agents, Agile is all about embodying and embracing and adapting change. And that is at the core of what we do alongside with product discovery work, which is really revolves around understanding the needs and requirements. So fundamentally, it's a lot of the skills or a lot of the things that we do today, except we're going to do them more frequently in a shorter period of time. Okay. Just give me a sec, something happened there. Okay, now we're good. Now, if you take only one thing away from this webinar, I want you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Regardless of where you are in your Agile journey, if you're at the beginning, if you've been doing it for a couple of years, if you're trying to increase your Agile fluency or really master the skill set, you're going to be uncomfortable. And moving in this direction will make you uncomfortable for a very long time. Okay. If you're fortunate enough to work with teams, or a team like I did 15 years ago, where your first experience is wonderful because there really is, everyone just sort of works off of sort of the strongest skills that they have, that's great. Most people, me included, once I really started understanding and applying the Scrum lifecycle, it became a little bit harder, and it was very uncomfortable for me to get adjusted at the beginning. So the standard advice I give is to start where you are. Do not expect perfection. We are used to trying to get all the information that we need up front to minimize any mistakes later on. You're going to make mistakes, and I want you to think of them as learning opportunities. So start with where you are. Don't expect perfection. One of the ways not to expect perfection of yourself and the rest of the team or other people that you work with is to take an experimentation approach. So I want you to think about, as you start learning and start working in an Agile way, think of everything as an experiment where you try something out, you learn from it, adjust, and then repeat. So start all over again, okay? Or work on the next thing that you're trying to adjust. It will be critical for you to figure out for yourself and within the context of your own organization how best to adapt your current business analysis approach. I want you to start off thinking just in time, so lightweight, just in time, just enough information, just when you need it. Because you will need to, there is no way around it, you will need to adjust it, because working an extra 20 hours a week is not going to help, right? That's not sustainable in the long term, so you need to figure out how to adapt what you do today, but also how to incorporate maybe some new tools and techniques for modeling your requirements, facilitation requirements, sessions, etc. You're going to always have an eye around continuous improvement. I've mentioned that earlier, so I'm just going to move forward to learning from others. I think it's important that you reach out and create some sort of community, either within your organization or externally, that can help you, because you're going to need some support when you're going through something you've never experienced before. Or if you hear things like, well, we don't have any requirements in Agile, so, what do we need you for? What are you going to work on? Or put everything on a post-it note and that should be good enough. If you're not comfortable with that, there are many other people out there external to your organization that can help you get comfortable with that. Okay? So it is important to reach out and build a community, even internally. So if you have internal communities of practice, maybe start injecting some Agile concepts in there. Okay, I'm going to go through this because I want to make sure that we have enough time. How are we doing for time? A few minutes?
You can keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So 3 things. There are many things that you might want to avoid for yourself personally as a BA. I don't want you to go back to your organizations and start, selling or convincing other people that you're required on Agile initiatives. Quite frankly, what I have found that has worked for me is you just demonstrate it through action. If you're really good at helping the product owner figure out what is of highest priority to make sure that we're building the right things, guess what? You'll be sought after. Because it's really hard to go from spending 3 months trying to figure out what your requirements are to 2 weeks. And if you can help product owners and stakeholders do that, you'll be invaluable. Invaluable to the rest of the team, but also to them, because you're going to help move them along. You should expect that you're going to have a dip in productivity once you start moving forward. And you need to carve off some space in order to figure out how to adapt your business analysis approaches, and also what new techniques can you incorporate. Okay? And the third thing is, you may get frustrated working with your team or your product owner, your stakeholders, whoever you're working with. And it's important to recognize when it's a team issue versus an organizational issue, because you're going to need more help trying to move the needle for organizational impediments or obstacles. Okay? If your governance team needs you to fill out 10 different documents even if you're working in an agile way, that's an organizational impediment. It's not a team impediment, and those are things that you need to recognize and differentiate which is which. Otherwise, it'll be like beating your head up against the wall and not making any progress. You're not able to fix that on your own. You're going to need a broader group to help with that. Okay. So as we close up, I'm not going to walk through this, but here are just some ideas that you can think about in order to adapt your business analysis approach. Feel free to take a screen capture of this. We are going to be thinking about other sort of add-on webinar topics that we might cover, so if you have any interest in these, we can always talk about them in depth in a different session. But again, this is the place to start. Here are some ideas where you can begin with that transition and in terms of adapting your approach. Here's a list of resources for additional reading. There's lots and lots of great stuff out there right now. Even if you just Google Agile Business Analysis, there's some wonderful places to start in terms of resources and books and some really great white papers out there. We do have one final poll before we go and give you the information around the PDUs and the CDUs. Because we are thinking of making this a series, we want to plan and ensure that we have the right topics. So Trevor's going to go ahead and put up a list, 5 categories that we've identified. So please go ahead and check off whatever you're interested in. If there's something that isn't on there, maybe just type it in either the chat box or the question box, and we'll make a note of it after the webinar and add it to the roadmap.
Yes, precisely. And yeah, this one here, again, the more votes we get, the better we can get a sense of what you guys want to learn more about. So yeah, please take a moment to select any of these topics that apply. So user stories, agile roadmaps, agile frameworks, including Scrum, XP, SAFe, DAD, etc. Agile modeling techniques or agile planning. I'll just give you a few more seconds here. Okay, thanks guys. We're gonna keep. We don't need to share the results of this one, but we'll just keep them on file for our own reference. And
thanks so much.
Yeah, that brings us to questions. So some of you have been writing questions as we go, and we've made a note of a few of those. While you guys are typing in your questions, I'm just going to get it started here. So, Michelina, one person has mentioned that they work on a few different projects, and they're wondering how they can manage extra, like all the extra agile ceremonies that they have to deal with in that situation.
Yeah, so this is a really common question, and actually a concern when we first start out, because in the traditional way or the traditional approach on projects, we tend to get assigned to 2 or 3 projects, medium to large, and if you're lucky enough to be on one large one, well, you have, your other issues related to that. But we tend, on average, to be assigned to 2 or 3, maybe sometimes 4 different projects at any given time. And I'm going to be honest with you, there is no silver bullet to solving that problem other than not being assigned to all those projects at the same time. The more that we can get to less and less projects that are assigned to the BAs, the more throughput, or the more that we can get things done and moving projects forward. So I'm going to tell you, there is no way. If you are assigned to 3 or 4 projects and all of them want to, use the Agile framework, and there's 5 standard ceremonies that you need to attend, you can imagine that you're going to basically be in meetings all the time, and you're not going to really be able to focus your attention on how do we figure out which requirements help us maximize the work not done or maximize ROI, or which ones are the most valuable for our customers. So there is no secret formula for how do you work on 3 or 4 projects at the same time if they all want to be agile. You can't. The best way to do it is to hopefully get it down to 2 if you can, or if your organization is willing to do that. And a little fun fact, so I was part of the Agile transformation team at TELUS for several years, and this always came up because it takes you longer to get stuff done if you're working on 3 or 4 different things at the same time. And one of the things that we found was that if we could get the business analysts or even the Agile teams working on maximum 2 at a time, 2 projects or 2 products, depending on how your organization fits, we found that we got a lot better output, a lot better, sorry, not output, but outcomes, because we were able to carve off the space to focus on the right requirements. So unfortunately, for those of you out there, there is no way to work on 4 projects at the same time. Ideally, one is ideal. I know it's not necessarily possible in a lot of organizations. 2, if you can get it down to 2, at least you can have a little bit of balance in terms of, where you should focus your attention. I hope that helps. I'm sorry if you were hoping for a silver bullet here. Unfortunately, the one thing that's consistent about the research is there is no way. There's a couple more. I see questions coming in. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that answer there, Michelina. I guess we have time for maybe one more. So there's someone here who is a business analyst, and they're wondering if you have any suggestion on how to get a prioritization process going in a slow-moving government agency. This person used to be in the private sector and Agile, and they're looking to get this going.
Okay.
Do you know what?
Yeah, so a couple of things, because I've done some work with folks in the public sector who are really trying to experiment with Agile. And one of the things that we have found that actually works there is there actually needs to be some commitment to rethinking their governance process and coming up with a governance process that might be more applicable for an Agile environment or an Agile project. So part of it is that's actually an organizational impediment. So that governance process really is about, on your own, you wouldn't be able to fix. So it is something that needs to change within the organization. Where I've seen success is if there's an openness to creating a stream where that governance process is an Agile one. So what would it look like if we have to work on an Agile project or in an Agile product or service or project? So what does that mean in terms of turnaround time on decisions, lightweight approach to information that you need to make those decisions? So it does require support at the organizational level to make change, and you definitely can't solve it on your own. The other thing that I have seen somewhat work is if there is one person or a leader that can influence the people on the committee, so usually it's a committee that approves, or does the prioritization. So if there is someone there who has a higher influence or can almost act as another term is like a chief product owner or a lead, sort of like the business lead, or the lead stakeholder that can help influence the rest of the people on that governance committee, then potentially that might be a way to do it. But it's the same thing. You have to change the way that the decisions are made. So it's the same thing. Like there's no silver bullet. That one is for sure an organizational impediment that requires some real support to change. And it is all baked in the existing process.
All right, that's great. Well, thank you, Michelina, for being with us here today. Before we wrap things up, guys, don't go anywhere yet. I'm sure you're all waiting on those PDUs and CDUs, but just have a few more little things that we're going to get out of the way beforehand. As you know, this webinar was put on by Global Knowledge, and we offer more courses in Agile. If you're interested in learning more, Michelina is actually one of our instructors here, and you can definitely take some of the courses that are on your screen now as a follow-up to what you've heard today. So 3 options could be the business analyst in an Agile environment. That's course code 7652 on our website, globalknowledge.ca. And or you could look into certified Scrum Master course. That's course code 4882. And finally 4883. Certified Scrum Product Owner, and you could build on what you've learned here today in those courses, again, on our website, globalknowledge.ca. So yeah, here's the meaty stuff that you all came here for. Your professional development units. I'm just going to leave this screen up for about a minute or so that you can all take a minute to write it down, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. In the meantime, I'll remind everyone, I've seen a few questions come up where people are asking about seeing certain slides again. Everything we've been doing is recorded. You will be getting a link as soon as we have one available, so you should be receiving one in your email. and this presentation will be available on the website. Okay, let's move on to the CDUs. Again, just take a moment to write that down or take a screenshot, and we'll bear with us here as we just give everyone a moment to do that. Thanks, everyone.
And I do notice that there's a bunch of questions that came in that we didn't really get a chance to get to, so Trevor will be sending out some follow-up email or something, so yep. My contact information will be in there. I'm the only person on LinkedIn with my name, so if you have a question or we didn't get a chance to answer it, I apologize for that. We went a little bit longer with the content. Feel free to reach out to me either on LinkedIn or Twitter. My Twitter handle is TheSkepticalBA, so feel free to direct message me on either Twitter or LinkedIn.
All right, that's great. And